On the one hand, it can be a bit dispiriting to look into the future, given the looming shadows that we see. I mean, the House is now moving towards launching a formal impeachment proceeding of the president of the United States, and many folks may think that that's a good thing, and I wouldn't attempt to persuade anybody otherwise. But it does, it is a foreboding sort of omen in terms of where this country is going.
Absolutely.
On a deeper level.
I mean, I do think what the president did is very troubling.
Right.
On the other hand, basically, he famously speaks off the cuff and says really appalling things. And to take this one to impeachment, frankly, I'm not sure what the right thing to do is, because it is obviously very troubling to have a president imply things in the context of an election like this. But wow, the drums of impeachment have been drummed loud from the beginning of his taking office, and it does seem like people are jumping at something that might constitute grounds where effectively it's not hard to see how this could end. I mean,
by the
something terrible.
Right. By the way, I'm conscious of the fact, as we touch on Trump here again, that just from a pure consumer perspective, probably a lot of people who would want to hear the part of this conversation where it's like Bret Weinstein and John Wood Jr. on Donald Trump, and we spend the next 10 or 20 minutes just talking about Trump, right? And Trump is good for clicks and
it's good for clicks
and ratings and so forth.
Maybe we'll edit him out for that reason.
Right, exactly. We don't want too many people.
No, we don't want the clicks
watching this video, right?
We're anti-click.
Exactly. That's how against the grain we are.
Oh, so
Mr.
against
Weinstein.
the grain.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not even going to put it on the net.
Exactly.
If you want to see it, you're going to have to come view the tape.
There's an
yourself.
Inception thing going on here, intellectual dark web, DarkHorse podcast. How much darker can we get before people can't even see the amazing things that we're doing? When we have reached
French roast. That's
when we have reached true philosophical commitment.
Yes, exactly. When we've gone completely dark.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what we're looking for. But it is. I'm trying to think why I even brought this up. I mean, I know why. It is interesting to note what motivates people as consumers. At a certain point, I look forward to the moment where people realize the fact that we do have the ability to sort of shift this conversation in a way that, from a demand side of things, is able to sort of change the market viability of certain messages and certain ideas and certain messengers and so forth. Right now, Trump is a messenger for sort of chaos in our culture and our government and so forth that derives support on some level from his worst enemies, because everybody's so obsessed with him.
Yeah.
And one thing I would just encourage people about is to just not be so obsessed with Donald Trump. And look, it's not that he's not an important figure in all of this. He is. But Trump would not exist if it were not for pre-existing patterns.
He's a symptom.
He really is a symptom. And some people want to push back against that. But anybody who sees him as the root cause of these larger problems is, on the one hand, therefore, I think, going to act in a way to where they're going to seek a short-term solution to the problem of Donald Trump, which is likely not even to be effective, and that might be what's happening here with this impeachment.
I heard this on the left. People are so focused on Trump that they have the sense that if we can just deal with that problem, that we will be somewhere. And the fact is, we would be nowhere.
But even if they succeeded in that effort, it would likely result in it would likely be attended by more or less a deafness to the broader and deeper concerns which brought him about in the first place, which will therefore lead to a continuation of those subterranean trends.
We'll still be here 20 years down the road.
One way or another, because somebody, craftier or smarter than the president, so on and so forth, will come back the other way. And I would say a similar thing to conservatives who believe that, because look, actually, it's precisely parallel. For many Republicans and conservatives, including a good many, who would tell you pretty readily that they don't want their kids to look to Donald Trump as a role model, but they felt that there needed to be a strong man, who stood up against the extremism of the left against the social justice lunacy that you see at Evergreen and that they feel is permeating the culture of Hollywood and the academy and our major institutions and our federal government even, that there needed to be somebody who stood in that gap regardless of the sort of social chaos and political and governing chaos that he left in his wake. For conservatives who think that way, I have the exact sort of same advice. Don't seek a short-term destructive solution to what is a longer-term sort of cultural and systematic problem. Ultimately, we need to create the foundation for the solutions to these deeper things and a consensus arrived at within the American people themselves. There's a political conversation about who we elect to be had on top of that, which I think allows for quite a bit of room for disagreement, right?
Yeah.
But for there to be sort of a revival in our democratic culture, a shift in terms of how we see each other and how we work together, that is the foundation upon which we will be able to absorb the negative impact of any candidate who might be elected to office who is more or less off kilter in terms of how they choose to govern this nation, because the ultimate corrective force in the country has been and needs to be the American people themselves. So putting our attention more on our relationships with one another and less on the shiny object that is,
The shiny orange object.
Right? He really does have a shiny head of hair too, doesn't he?
He's a unique person.
He is a unique person. Light bounces off of it like crazy. But to take our eyes off of the shiny object that is Donald Trump or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or take your pick.
Yep.
That is a necessary thing, I think. For us to draw people's attention away from the figures who arise as kind of the caricatures of who the enemy is on the other side or who your champion is, right?
Yeah.
And to return it squarely to focus on the fact that really this isn't a question of you and Donald Trump. This is a question of you and your neighbor.
I like that.
Right. And
this is a question of you and your neighbor.
Right. And to see the connection between one and the other.
Yeah. I love this framing. Mm-hmm. I have complex feelings about the president. I feel we are imperiled. I don't really feel like he's up to the challenge of the office. On the other hand, all right, let me try reaching across the aisle on this one. Donald Trump accomplished something that nobody else in recent memory has done.
Right.
He broke through the duopoly. Mm-hmm. And that required somebody of a particularly unusual constitution, and we are now left with such a person in office, which has been an interesting experience to be sure. Right. But to the extent that we were suffering from the duopoly and something broke through, it wasn't Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was my guy in this fight, right. But he couldn't do it. And in the end, he folded to Clinton, which I must say still leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. I think he should have stayed true to the fight. But Trump did manage to break through the duopoly, which tells us, in fact, that it is possible. And that is an important, if he's done nothing else, he has done that service for us, as he has demonstrated that the story that could not be disrupted by anything was, in fact, open to be challenged by somebody who was sufficiently politically savvy, which I think he is.